Alright, here's the review for the Unit 4 test. I'm going to start with the problem, number 1, in which all we're asking you to do is to simplify this problem using the FOIL process. And FOIL stands for first, outer, inner, last. So your first terms, which here are your x's, will get multiplied together, and x times x is x squared. Then you have your outer terms. Those would be the terms that are furthest apart. So that would be the x and the positive 7. Those multiplied together get you 7x. Then we move on to the inner terms. The inner terms would be the two terms inside the parentheses very close together, which would be the negative 4 and the x. Those multiplied together get you a negative 4x. And then lastly, we have the last term in the first set of parentheses and the last term in the second set of parentheses, which is negative 4 times positive 7, which gets you a negative 28. Once that step is completed, the only thing you really have left to do is combine up any like terms. So we look, and there's no other x squared terms, so we have an x squared in our final answer. We have two terms that have just x's in them. We have a positive 7x and a negative 4x. Those added together will get you a positive 3x. And then our last term is just a whole number, and there are no other whole numbers. So we would just bring that down, which is negative 28. So there's your final answer, x squared plus 3x minus 28. Okay. In the next problem, you can see that we ask you to factor, but we are not going to solve. You'll notice there is no equal sign. So on your test, do not put an equal sign there. We are just trying to factor this trinomial. So first thing we would want to do is check for greatest common factor. We've got a 4, a 3, and a negative 1. And it doesn't appear that there's a common factor for 4, 3, and 1 other than 1. So then we go and say, well, can't be a difference of squares because there's three terms, so there must be opposite of FOIL. So we're going to write ourselves two sets of parentheses. Now remember, in the FOIL process, the first terms will get you this first term, the last term will get you the last term, and the outer and inner terms will get you the middle term. So you're going to have to check that along the way. Well, on this problem, we have a 4x squared. Well, there's possible different factors of 4 that we could use. We could use 4 and 1 or 2 and 2. We use 4 and 1 or 2 and 2. And we're not really sure yet which ones we're going to use. So let's go ahead and put what we do know, that each term will have an x. And then because the final term is negative, remember the last term times the last term has to get you the last term. So that would be this term here and this term here. Multiplied together has to get you this negative 1. So we know in order to get a negative, we need to have opposite signs. So we'll make one of these terms positive and one of them minus. And then the only factors of 1, of course, are 1 and 1. So we'll list those in. Now, we've only got left to figure out what the factors of 4 are, because remember, the first term here times the first term here must get you the first term. But what we have to be careful of is that the outer terms and the inner terms get you the negative 3x. So our options are 2 and 2 or 4 and 1. So if we tried 2 and 2 here, this would get you negative 2x and positive 2x, which would cancel out. So we must have to use the 4 and the 1. Now the only question is, do we want the 4, because 4 and 1 will get you 3 when you subtract. So the question is, do we want the 4 to be positive or negative? Since we end up with a negative 3x, we'd like our 4 to be negative in this case. So since the negative 1 is listed here, the 4 is going to have to get placed over here, meaning that this term here would just be a 1. So we should double check, make sure that this gets you the same trinomial. 4x times 1x gets you 4x squared. That's nice. The 4x times a negative 1 would get you a negative 4x, and 1 times 1x would get you positive 1x, and those combined together would get you a negative 3x, which is what we were looking for there. And then the last terms, positive 1 and negative 1, do get you a negative 1. So this is factored. And since, again, we were not asked to solve, this here would be your final answer. Okay? Let's do one more of those. Let's do this factoring question here. Remember, the first step in factoring should be to check for a greatest common factor. In this case, we've got a 2 and an 18. Well, it looks like we've got a common factor of 2 there, so we'll pull a 2 out. And then it looks like there's an x in both terms, so we can pull an x out. Now, doing greatest common factor is kind of like doing the opposite of distributing. Okay, so the 2x is going to be inside, and then we're going to have something minus something. Now, when you take the 2x out of this term, that goes there, and then when you take the 2x out of this term, that's going to go here. So 2x out of 2x squared leaves you with an x, and 2x out of negative 18x is a 9. And again, we should verify to make sure this is factored correctly. 2x times x is 2x squared, minus 2x times 9 is 18x. So again, here we are, here's our final answer, and because the directions said do not solve, because there was no equal sign, the problem is done.